Monty, you have been so instrumental in kind of pointing me in the right direction. And
it was about looking at your character defects in spirituality.
It's the integration of clinical practices with the 12 steps.
It's an absolute pleasure. He certainly knows a lot of people. He's got a lot of energy. And sometimes when you don't have so much energy, he picks you up and carries you.
Having the Monty Man there certainly helps.
This is one of the places that is about the business of the solution.
The views expressed on this special broadcast of the Take 12 radio show do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT Recovery Broadcasting or its affiliates. KHLT is not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
Now here's that guy who's getting less popular minute by minute. Your host, the Multi-Man.
Well, greetings, recovery family, advocates of, and perhaps some of you who should be in recovery. Welcome to another episode of Take12Radio.com on your internet dial here at KHLT Recovery Broadcasting. We are broadcasting from the studios directly outside of the outskirts of beautiful downtown Albany, Oregon, in the KHLT Recovery Broadcasting Studios. It is so good to have you with us. And by the way, some of you have been commenting. At the end of some of our shows, including this one, there's a little meow at the end. Well, that's our studio cat, Christy. And we've been posting some of her pictures up on our YouTube version of the show. So if you want to know what she looks like, because some of you asked, go to the end of the YouTube thing, and right at the very end, you'll see a really quick, about a 3-second thing, and there's Christy the cat. Okay, for whatever that's worth, you send me emails, you ask me, so I'm telling you. Hey, listen, welcome to the show. Our email address here is take12radio@comcast.net, and if you're listening on your smart device or your tablet, our website is take12radio.com. You can use the number 12, or you can spell that out. It will take you to the same place. Hey, listen, I want to welcome our brand new sponsor, Broad Highway Intervention and Recovery Services, and we're going to be we'll hear a little thing from them a little later on. But I just wanted to welcome them and tell all you guys that if you're interested in sponsoring any of our shows or advertising with us, we have an amazing program that it beats anybody's, and it is so blasted affordable that you probably won't even believe it. You compare it to regular, any radio, internet, terrestrial, conventional, whatever. We want to help you succeed in what you're doing. Now, listen, if you're selling Q-tips, we're probably not going to take you on as a sponsor. We do stuff that is really focused on recovery and surrounded around supporting the whole recovery deal, because we feel that it's so vitally important. So let us know here. Give me an email address. You can go to the website, click on Advertise with Us, and check it out. You would be in some really good company. Let me tell you right now, some tremendous people here at Take 12 Radio helping us to deliver this thing to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Also, don't forget to check out our Recovery and Positive music. It is family-safe music. It is by recovery recording artists, Christian contemporary artists, jazz musicians, blues musicians, but it's all focused on solution. It's all focused on a positive message. Check that out at Take 12 Radio. Just click on the recovery music link. Hey, listen, coming up in the near future, Mark L., recovery comedian, is going to be doing a show specifically with the Narcotics Anonymous community in mind once a month here at Take 12 Radio, so be watching for that as well. All right, today on the show, this week on the show, Scott Graham is my guest, and he and his wife Jenny, they have CareFrontations. Now, CareFrontations, listeners, you know that in the last several months, we've been doing a lot around intervention. We just finished up a workshop, a 4-part workshop, which you can access with Tony Nussbarger from Benchmark under our workshops link. What intervention is, what it isn't, the different kinds, etc. We've been doing a lot with that. We are doing some stuff with the International Association of Drug Court Professionals as well. We interview a lot of people that are treatment providers that are involved. There's a whole nother world out there, my friends, other than just 12-step support meetings and service conventions. There really is. There's a whole nother world out there. And it is something that is worth your while to look into. If you're in recovery, if you're a family member of or an advocate, or you're simply curious, let me tell you, there are resources available to you like never before. And you really need to take advantage of that. And here at Take 12 Radio, if you go to our website, you'll find links and stuff for you that you're not going to find. Well, you're just going to spend a lot of time searching for a lot of stuff where you can come to one shop place here at Take 12 Radio. And if we can't direct you into that path that you need and you're curious about, call us and we'll make sure that somebody can. All right. As I said, Scott Graham is my guest this week. Now, Scott spent 11 years working in the treatment field as he and Jenny built their intervention practice. As an adjunct college-level instructor, he taught drug and alcohol counselor certification coursework. Scott worked as a counselor in both inpatient and outpatient treatment, as well as in private practice. He also worked as a program director in chemical dependency treatment and as a social service director. Both Scott and Jenny have worked in the public school system as intervention specialists, counselors, and as trainers for Living Works and the Recovery Foundation, training thousands in the areas of suicide prevention, chemical dependency, intervention, family systems, and community mobilization. Now, prior to Scott's work, and this is really interesting, he was an undercover vice narcotics deputy in the West Hollywood area for Los Angeles County for the Sheriff's Department. And that is boy, you talk about crime per capita, something else. And I've lived down in that area, so I know what I'm talking about. Scott, welcome to Take 12 Radio, my friend.
Thank you, Monty. It's good to be with you.
Tim Adrian, I just want to give a shout out to him from Northbound Treatment Services up here in the Pacific Northwest. Listeners, is the one that guided me in Scott's direction. And he came up to me, Scott, and he says, you've got to talk to this guy. You got to get him on your show. He has got an absolute phenomenal story of experience, strength, and hope. So what was going on? What were you doing, as a youth that even propelled you into any of this?
Well, like so many, I grew up in the late 60s and early 70s. I graduated high school in 1976, so that gives you kind of a snapshot of my age. And like so many of my peers, I was into smoking pot and just partying, having fun, but yet I was also an all-city athlete in football and baseball and a pretty decent student and grew up, in a pretty not affluent area, but, middle income and great family and that sort of a thing. And I was one of those who, unfortunately, kind of fell prey to being obsessed with wanting to get high and yet still able to keep that front on of a good student, a good athlete, and had a girlfriend and popular in school and all of that. But I quickly got into partying every single day, and when I got out of high school and didn't want to go on to college to pursue sports because I'm not a real huge individual, but I was actually burnt out on sports. And so I had a girlfriend from junior high all the way through high school, and I knew I wanted to get married. And I got into cleaning swimming pools, of all things. I started my own swimming pool cleaning business and was very successful at that. I was quickly had a route of about 100 pools I was cleaning a week and making some money, but I was also partying every day. And I had 2 children pretty early on. By the time I was 22, I had 2 young kids, and like I said, a thriving pool business, and that I was spending, at that time, easily $1,000 a month on cocaine, marijuana, drinking. It just didn't matter to me what I could get my hands on as long as I was under the influence and yet still able to keep the front on and maintain work and relationship. My wife at the time had no idea how much I was actually partying, drugs I was putting into my body. And I knew, though, that what I was doing was not, was not good, was not right. I was, from as far back as I can remember, I believed in God. I had this childlike faith, a conviction inside me. I really knew what right and wrong was. I never could deny that. And so I had this inner turmoil within me from way back when. And yet I just didn't have the wherewithal to, break away from it, or the strength to, just do what I knew what was right. And so, ironically, I remember coming home from a night of partying. I'm, around about 23, and I see this commercial to become an LA County Sheriff's Deputy on TV. And I'm thinking, I wonder if I could do that. Of course, I'd have to lie and say that I've, never done this or done that, and maybe gotten drunk a few times. I mean, I literally would have to lie if I wanted to make that work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went ahead and applied. See, I wanted to get a career where I knew that my kids would look at me and be proud of me, because I knew that, as they grew, they would know that I was, doing substances, and I just didn't want them to follow in my footsteps. So I just needed an avenue out, and so I went ahead and applied, and believe it or not, 11 months later, I got hired.
Wow.
County Sheriff's Deputy. And of course, I did have to lie. How many times have you ever gotten drunk? And I figured, well, legally, I could start drinking at 21. I'm 23, so I said, a couple times. And have you ever smoked marijuana? Oh, maybe a couple times, so on and so forth. And the irony of this, I remember when they accepted me, and I had to, but prior to that, I had to go through all the different tests, the physical agility, which I passed with flying colors. The written test was no problem. The oral interview, that was one that really kind of concerned me. I was going to be in front of 6 seasoned sheriff's deputies, ask certain questions, and I have to give pretty logical answers, which I wasn't too concerned as far as not being able to do that. But boy, was I nervous. I was nervous driving down there. And at that time, my coping mechanisms were to, smoke weed, chill out, that kind of a thing. And so, believe it or not, I smoked a joint on the way down to my oral interview.
Oh my gosh!
Sheriff's Department, and I passed with flying colors. And so I remember walking out of that interview, and they said you passed, and part of me was very excited and proud of myself, but the other part of me was just beating myself up. Like I was saying to myself, "Are you kidding me? You are so crazy to." Do that. I mean, they could do a urine test, a lie detector test. They could do all these different things, but they didn't. And so, fast forward, I go through the academy, do great there. I was elected the Guidon, which is a pretty high honor. Your peers elect a person from the academy, which was 176 people in my academy class, to carry the flag when we go on runs. And so I was, a leader in that, as I was all through my sports and high school career and whatnot. And so I stopped using. I didn't stop drinking, but I stopped using. And that was a big deal for me, because I had gone, I started using at 15, so, I had a good 7-8 years under my belt of pretty much daily use. So I really felt good about putting that stuff down, and of course I was so afraid that I wasn't going to be able to remember all the things I had to remember, how marijuana takes away your short-term memory. Mm-hmm. But I was able to bounce back and do well, and I got assigned to work out in the jail. That's what you do when you get out of the academy. And so I was assigned to a maximum security facility where I worked, and I still was, for all intents and purposes, at least in my mind, clean and sober, because I was just drinking. I wasn't, using any other illegal substances. But I quickly, got used to my job and kind of settled in, and I moved out, bought a house out in the desert, and, I wanted to do a geographical change, which is so classic, right, to move away from all the temptations of what I grew up with. And I moved into this really nice neighborhood, and I've got a guy who works at the studios, another guy who's in the construction industry, another guy who's got his own business as a mechanic, and they're all big-time cocaine, marijuana dealers and partiers. I mean, just, my gosh, I couldn't have moved to a worse location if I was trying to be clean and sober. And so I started to get involved in it again, but my rationale was, what I do on my time is my business, what I do on the county's time is their business, and I'm going to abide by their rules, which I did. But I could see myself slowly getting back into that old way again. And then about 11 months into working as a maximum security deputy, I get assigned to work West Hollywood, of all places. So I go, do great there. I have a great training officer, 6 months of really intensive training. And so I'm still doing good. I'm not partying or anything, but drinking on the side. And finally, I get on my own, and I'm working a day car by myself, and I'm doing really well. I'm actually taking so many people to jail because I'm actually geared toward looking for drug and alcohol, people who are involved in that kind of activity. And so it came very easy to me. I could kind of spot them or sniff them out.
Yeah, you bet.
And so I got recognized pretty quickly as somebody who, really did good work. And I got assigned to vice narcotics about, a year into working patrol. And so I took it, and we had a special projects unit that dealt with just the local West Hollywood area, which is a very small area, but it is the highest crime rate area per capita in all of LA County because it's very vulnerable. It's a gay community. It's a melting pot for ethnic people from all over the world, and usually elderly. So it was a very vulnerable population. So a lot of things were happening.
A lot of prostitution there, male and female?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was Santa Monica was male, and Sunset Strip was female.
Yeah, right.
So, so anyway, I'm taking all kinds of people to jail. I'm setting records and having a blast, having a fun time. Working hard and playing hard. But my personal life was beginning to crumble, and my wife of 7 years decides to leave me one day with my 2 kids, which was very devastating to me. I mean, I love my children, and I was having marital problems, but still, loved my wife at the time. But she leaves, and she was done. She was done with me. We were partying a lot on my days off, and she was not healthy. I was not healthy, and so she did the cut and run on me. And so financial problems were starting to mount. Within a 6-month period, she leaves with the kids. My car gets repossessed. I have to file bankruptcy. My jet ski gets repossessed. And my whole life is crumbling.
Not the jet ski.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So, but, it was, in hindsight, probably the best thing that happened because, we're crisis-driven people. And,
right.
I was in crisis. And so my way of coping again was still medicating myself, escaping through substances. And one fateful night, I remember we were raiding a motel area, and there was cocaine everywhere. And so I'm in a room all by myself, nobody around, and there's this baseball-sized ball of cocaine. And instead of taking it, bagging it for evidence, I bagged it from my pocket, and I put it in my pocket. And boy, that just started this slide of greed and justification where, I would be taking drugs from either people I'd stop on the streets or, raids, whatever, to feed my habit. And in 1 year's time, I did that all day long, and yet still taking more people to jail than anybody. And long story short, I ended up getting caught while on duty. I was arrested back in 1985, and I was on ABC, NBC, and CBS all in one night. And I was looking at 6 to 8 years of prison time. And, of course, there's a lot of story backdrops to all of that. But nevertheless, my world was definitely crashed in.
Yeah.
And so I lost my job that night and spent a night in jail and got bailed out. And that was embarrassing, of course. But yet my family knew what I was doing. They all knew that I was doing drugs, and I don't think they knew exactly how I was getting the drugs, but they knew I was using. And they had no idea or no concept of, doing an intervention. And the sheriff's department, of course, had no idea to do something like that either. And so I went from being a sheriff's deputy to, I had all my girlfriends at that time were strippers, high-end strippers, and I said, Scott, you should become a stripper. You can make good money doing that. And I thought, well, gosh, I don't know what else I could do. I got to work. I've got, 2 kids to support myself to support. So, here I go from pool man to policeman. Now I'm a stripper.
Wow.
I stripped for 6 months. I mean, I had a blast, and still using, but I was getting tired. I was getting so tired. I didn't want to kill myself, but boy, if you looked at my behavior, you'd say he's killing himself. And I knew I was. I knew I had something had to break. And so, I guess the Lord has His hand upon all of us. And I just did a show, a strip thing for somebody, and the next day was Mother's Day, and I'm at an outside cantina with a buddy of mine, just hanging out, and these two women came walking up, sitting down next to us, and one really caught my eye. Oh, nice gal, happens to be Jenny. And so I introduced myself to her, meet her, and 20 days later we were married. And she knew what I was facing. She knew what I was up against. And she just thought she was going to be a friend of mine, of course, but she'll tell you she had a download that the Lord said, I've got someone for you. 4 years she waited for, short, stocky, brunette guy, green eyes, more freckles than her, had 2 kids. She wanted somebody who had 2 kids, and the Lord gave her a picture of me.
Wow.
He didn't say that he'd be facing 6 to 8 years in prison.
Right.
But she'll tell you that he told her, hang on to my hand, hang on to me tighter than anything. And so she was obedient to that. And we went for a ride. I ultimately got sentenced to 2 years in prison. I pled guilty to what I had done because I wanted to be free from the past. I knew I had to be, I had to lay it all out. I couldn't hide anymore from the truth. And so I was just laid bare before the mercy of the court. And fortunately, they gave me a low term, which was 2 years. Could have done 8 years. And ended up doing 13 months of that. My first cellmate, I was right next to Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker.
Oh, geez.
That's who I was next to when I was in prison. And so, again, fast forward those couple of years, I get out, and I have no idea what the heck I'm going to do for my life. Jenny, we had a child. My third child was born, Timothy. First time I got to hold him, he was 2 months old. And first time I saw him was through glass, which is very painful, but, that was the reality of the consequences of my choices. Mm-hmm. And so I'm out of prison, and I'm thinking, what the heck am I going to do? And so I'm just kind of hanging out. I'm at a car lot, just looking at cars, pretending like I want to buy one, just trying to do something. And this big old guy comes walking up to me, and I'm looking at this old VW van, old, like, kind of hippie van. And I start talking to him about the van, and it's clear to me this guy knows nothing about cars. And so I asked him, I said, how long have you been selling cars? And he goes, about 6 months. And I said, well, it kind of shows. What'd you do before? He said, I was a police officer out here, and this is in California, Port Hueneme. I said, really? I said, I was a cop, too, the LA County Sheriff. He said, why aren't you a cop anymore? And he said, well, I stole $35,000 of cocaine out of the evidence locker and got popped, and here I am. I was like,
wow.
My jaw dropped. I went, no way. Me, too. And, our stories were a little different, but yet the same.
Yeah.
This guy was an undercover narc, head of the Narcotics Police Officers Association, Medal of Valor. This guy fell from a high place, as did I. And he went to treatment where I didn't. I went very much to prison. I was 9 months clean and sober. I turned my life around. I had a reason to live. Jenny was my reason. And yet I hadn't dealt with all my issues. I was basically doing behavior modification. I didn't have this transformational moment yet. Mm-hmm. And so this friend of mine who I met, his name's John Jenks. He still does investigation work, but we did interventions together. He brought me along, and the first intervention I went on, I came home. I said, Jenny, this is what I want to do. This is it. This fits perfect. So I went back to school to the University of Santa Barbara and went through the certification coursework, advanced coursework, and became a counselor and started working in the field and doing interventions, doing a lot of talks. I've done hundreds and hundreds of talks. Back there in the 80s, there was a lot of money for management training and those kinds of things. And, IBM, Chevron Gas, Bank of America, at the time Security Pacific Bank. I mean, we got contracts with all these big companies where we go in and do trainings. Because, you got to do ex-cops and, in recovery, doing intervention work. It's a story that people want to hear, and so they're more open to being taught, actually. And so we did that for a while, and there just was never enough, intervention work. That's all that we could do. And there really wasn't enough work to support 2 families. So he went back to investigative work. That's kind of his passion, and I didn't grow up wanting to be a cop. It's just something I fell into. And so, like you had said at the beginning, I worked in the field and kind of went up the ranks as far as a therapist and a program manager, and then building programs from the ground up, and doing interventions on the side. And so, like you had said, 11 years it took before finally Jenny and I decided, let's just do intervention work. This is our passion. We really feel like the Lord is going to, anoint it, and we got to step out in faith and do it. So, we started marketing ourselves, and up to that time we were just doing local interventions in Washington. We live up on Camino Island, about an hour north of Seattle, so we're just kind of in the general Washington area. So I just started marketing myself, and one thing leads to another, and all of a sudden we're getting more calls, and so currently we field anywhere between 40 to 70 phone calls a month, and this month will be over tomorrow. We will have done 9 interventions, 3 transports. We do a couple of family programs for different treatment programs. We do our intervention model and kind of twist it a little bit to be a relapse prevention model. So that's kind of what our months look like, month in, month out. To date, we have done, well over 2,000 interventions.
Wow.
And the anointing that we have from what we do, it's just amazing. We created a model that it just works so effectively. I mean, just to give you an example, I think I can look back at the last 30 interventions we've done. We've done, let's see, we're in April. We've probably done close to 40 interventions, and I can think of only one person who's not in treatment right now out of the 40 that we've done.
My goodness.
So we have a model that works, which, if we have time, you want me to kind of give a quick thumbnail sketch of
Sure.
how it is we do what we do, because there's a lot of models out there and a lot of different styles and, of course, different personalities who are doing interventions. And it seems like everybody wants to be an interventionist, and it's they make a lot of money, and I've mortgaged my home 4 times to still do what I'm passionate about. And it's not about the money. There's people who are charging so much money to do interventions, which I think is it's almost predatory. And there's people who shouldn't be doing interventions. Their motives are wrong, and their personalities really aren't right for this kind of work. Because you've got a family who's in crisis, and they're just we're saving souls is what we're doing.
Yeah.
So.
And we're going to talk. We're going to talk about that. What intervention isn't later on in the show here as well. Scott, we got to take a break, and when we come back, let's delve into this thing. CareFrontations. By the way, congratulations on the name. Really nice. Really nice. I love it. The website, folks, is CareFrontations.com. It's spelled out just like it sounds. You can follow the links here at take12radio.com, right here on Friday's page, and other pages, CareFrontations.com. More with Scott Graham, my guest of CareFrontations, when we come back. Don't go away.
Origins Recovery Centers provides integrated inpatient treatment for substance abuse and co-occurring disorders. At Origins, clients receive expert medical, clinical, and spiritual care individually designed for their needs. Our clients leave Origins with the foundation upon which they will build the rest of their lives. Call now to speak with an admissions specialist. Our toll-free number is 888-843-8935. That's 888-843-8935. Origins, delivering real solutions for real families.
Listen, do you have a loved one that is suffering from a drug or alcohol addiction and is unable or even unwilling to seek help? Well, if you've tried unsuccessfully on your own to get that individual the help they desperately need, then an intervention may be the only chance you have of saving that person's life. Here's the number I want you to call. 877-487-1599. You don't have to wait until your loved one hits bottom. By then, it could be too late. Call Broad Highway Recovery now. 877-487-1599. If not you, then who? All right, and welcome back. And my guest this week is Scott Graham. He and his wife Jenny have CareFrontations. The website is CareFrontations.com. And by the way, the phone number there is 888-344-1632, and we'll have it up here on the screen on our YouTube as well as on the website. Their email address is info@carefrontations.com. Scott is my guest this week. An incredible story of what it was like, what happened, what it's like today. Really, how God has taken what seemed to be just an absolutely insane, well, it was insane, a life, and has turned it around and is bringing not only glory to himself, because that's what God does, but is saving souls, saving lives, and literally intervening for people who are very, very sick. Okay, Scott, I want to listen to this soundbite here. Something that a lot of people don't get, a lot of people don't understand, is that your loved one, or whoever it is that you're concerned about, doesn't have to go on to the bitter end, doesn't have to hit bottom, so to speak, to get well. We've had this mentality for years that, well, until they've hit bottom, until they've crashed and burned, and usually it's what our description of what that means is, then they're not ready. Listen to this soundbite that comes off of the website, folks. Check this out.
A lot of times people ask, does my loved one have to be ready for help to be successful? And the truth of it is, no, they don't. Because when you stop and think about it, people who need intervention, well, they're not enough on their very own to say, I'm worthy to get help. So they need people in their life to be the reason to say yes to help. I think of people who get married. They lay their lives down for one another. Moms and dads, they lay their lives down for their children, and they do it gladly. And so I think it's completely appropriate to ask a person to get help for us. I mean, if not for you, do it for us, because treatment you can trust. They will help broaden the perspective so that this person will be in treatment for not only themselves, but for their loved ones. And they're still going to need their loved ones to be motivators during that course of recovery for the rest of their life. Because the truth is, I don't think anybody's ever going to be enough to not only get help, but to work hard in treatment and to maintain their sobriety. They need people in their life to be the motivators to do all those things.
Okay, here's the question I have. You and I and so many others and people listening to the show, we've heard the statement for years. You can't do it for anybody else. You have to do it for you. And I've always felt uncomfortable about that statement because I think it's a broad brush, and I don't think it's fair. You make a statement in there, do it for us. Sometimes that's all the person can hear, right? Is that, do it for us, do it for your wife and your kids, or your husband and your kids. And that seems to be the thing that launches them forth into the beginning of recovery. True?
Very, very true. I mean, if you were gonna poll literally everybody in treatment currently today, and ask them what was the motivator that brought you into treatment, I think almost in total you would hear, because my family was done. They were done with me. And so it is a great motivator to propel somebody into treatment. And again, I know it's contrary to what you hear in the recovery community or the support groups. It's, do it for yourself, do it for yourself. And there's truth to that, of course. I mean, you have to be part of the reason. Yeah. But I know my 28 years of sobriety, Monty, I'm the last reason why I'm staying sober. It's my faith, my wife, my children, my grandchildren, my family, my friends and colleagues. That's the strong motivator for me, because I know that all by myself I can rationalize, I can justify. I'm kind of dangerous all by myself.
Well, and you know what? Here's something that I truly believe, and I get into trouble all the time, but that's okay. Is even when you're sponsoring somebody, or you're mentoring somebody, or you're the spiritual advisor for somebody in recovery, if you're doing it for the purpose of your sobriety, you're doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, I believe that. I think that we were created to do for each other. That we were. It's like the old saying. It's better to to give than receive. It gives us more satisfaction to be outward focused than to be inward focused. And so, in recovery, of course, there's that blend. You got to be balanced, because people as well will always let you down at some point in time if you're in a relationship, especially an intimate relationship. So, but for me, though, I think it's really important to note this too. I had my transformational moment when I was reading a book called Driven by Eternity by John Bevere. And it's this allegory, and it's got all these personalities that anybody can identify with, and yet all these personalities were believers. And yet when it came to kind of Judgment Day in this story, this allegory, found out that these personalities who thought they were in the club weren't in the club. And it so shook my faith. It shook me. Gosh, I wonder if I'm in the club. Because, I wanted to, it just had this moment where it's like, okay, I've got to love what God loves, and I've got to hate what he hates.
You bet.
And the word says there'll be no drunkards in heaven. I mean, boy, if you take that literally, that'll scare a lot of people into sobriety. And so I found a place in my head and my heart where I actually hated the substances I once used. And because, once I internalized that and it was really who I was, I hate the substances I once used. I am no longer enticed by them. Never. And never again will I go back, because I'm not enticed. And I know there will always be bumps in the roads, tragedy, things happen in our life on this side of heaven. We're at battle. And so, again, if you're not enticed by something, if you hate it, you won't be enticed. And that to me, that's true freedom. And that's what I'm praying for. That's what I'm wanting for every single intervention I do. I'm not a big fan of behavior modification, although I know that has to happen at first. I am more of a fan of transformation, because when you're transformed, you will have then true freedom in recovery. And we've got to do something about the relapse rates. I mean, they're so sky high. I want to just, literally vomit every time I hear, relapse is a part of recovery.
Oh,
and,
God, I'm so sick of hearing that.
It doesn't have to be.
It isn't. I tell people I work with, it's not a part of recovery until it happens. Then it can be, but it doesn't need to happen. You aren't required to relapse to grow in your recovery. Come on.
Absolutely not. And just in the same vein, just like we were talking about before, you don't have to hit bottom before you're ready for help.
Right.
We can raise the bottom up. And I had a dad one time, I got bold, and I said, I think it's criminal to wait for your son to hit bottom. Number one, you don't know what his bottom is, and why would you want your son to suffer even one more day? It makes no sense to me. And he got angry with me. I mean, literally was angry that I would even say that. And the sad reality to this story is that his son died 2 weeks later, as he was waiting for him to hit bottom. His bottom was death.
Yeah.
And so that's why we're so passionate about not waiting. I just people are so afraid to be rejected. And I didn't wake up this morning going, boy, I can't wait until I'm told to F off, and I can't wait till somebody rejects me. It's the last thing I want any given day, but we're all called to be peacemakers, not peacekeepers.
Mm-hmm.
Peacekeeper is one who doesn't say anything or placate somebody, but a peacemaker speaks the truth. But in what I help people do is speak their truth in a way in which it can be received. And so I actually feel, you can call me an interventionist, but I actually feel more like an English teacher than anything else. Because people struggle. They really, really struggle with the best intentions to put their truth on a table in which it can be received. And that's why, the communication breaks down and people, don't get help when they actually could.
You and I are kind of interesting creatures. People know we're come June 5th, we'll have been broadcasting for 10 years, and people know that we're faith-based and solution-focused, and we're still the only faith-based recovery radio station on the internet broadcasting every day, and we get some flack for that. That's okay. I totally expected that we would, and I welcome it. But we're kind of an interesting bird because as believers, as people whose higher power, if you will, is Jesus Christ, we don't, and people that believe in the recovery process and understand that we're talking about it. You know, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous only calls this a disease one time, and then it refers to it as a spiritual disease. Now, it refers to it as an illness in other areas, but we're in that kind of in that interesting spot between the faith community, who understands the solution but not the problem, and the secular 12-step community that understands the problem but not the solution. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. It's it's absolutely a blend of both. You can't separate the physicality of who we are from the spirituality of who we are, and so there's got to be both have to be addressed, both have to be acknowledged. And I think the relapse rate is evident where it's not. I mean, it's no wonder relapse is high, because people are not addressing their spiritual the component there. And if you look at it as a moral issue, then you don't understand the physiological realities to addiction. And it's a simple problem, but yet it's so very, very complex.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just boils down to, I often have people say, how do we know if they really have a problem? Or, they try to analyze it or try to put logic into a completely illogical problem.
Yes.
and that's why we use the power of love, and we use the power of truth. I mean, truth all by itself is powerful. It doesn't take sides. It is what it is. I get it. But truth by itself is not near as powerful as when you combine it with love. And the same thing with love all by itself. Very powerful, but when you combine it with truth, there is nothing that can stand up to that. Nothing. No addiction, no dysfunction, no anger,
right?
No intellect. Right. And that's why we've had the success that we've had, because of how we present both of those simultaneously.
And God is about 100% complete, unapologetically truth. But he's also about 100% unapologetically grace. And us human beings, we're the ones that have the problem with the mess in the middle. He doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And a big piece of what we do, we have a reconciliation piece that we present when appropriate. And I'll tell you what, when that happens, mountains are moved. It's just, or they just crumble.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing to watch. It's why I'm more passionate today after 28 years of doing this work than ever before, and it's because of it's just so real. I mean, it rivals childbirth. It's kind of messy like childbirth is, and it's so pure and tender and sweet, and even violent. Not that people get crazy now. I mean, that kind of
no, but I hear you.
We're taking heaven by storm. That's what we're doing.
Let's just listen to this next sound bite, folks. If you're a family member or a concerned friend, you really need to get this piece. Check this out.
A lot of times people don't really realize that they're enabling, and so I get asked, am I an enabler? What am I doing that's hurting the problem or helping the problem? Well, enabling in its grandest form is where you're, giving somebody money when you know that they've got a drug problem, or you're bailing them out of jail, or you're calling work because they're sick. They're not suffering the consequences of their actions and their choices. But the most subtle form of enabling would be where your loved one, if they know that they have a problem, and you're still in communication with them, talking to them, texting them, email, letters, if they're living under your roof, the message is that I'm okay with your problem. When in reality you're not, but in the distortion of their thinking, because you're still in a relationship, because they're still living in your house, they're thinking that you must be okay with my problem. So the only way to break enabling, the only way to get somebody help sooner rather than later, the only way where you can be part of the solution and not part of the problem is where your loved one absolutely knows you're not okay with what they're doing. You're sick and tired of being sick and tired. You're not going to dance the dance anymore. So I'm a big believer in redefining your boundaries that would say if a person is not willing to get help after you've done an intervention, should be after, not before, that you're prepared to say, I'm going to put relationship on hold. I'm going to suspend any further communication, contact, or support of any kind whatsoever until you get help. Once you get help, you follow through and you maintain, then I will be there to help you and support you to the best of my ability. That is the cleanest way to stop enabling. It is the fastest way to get this person that you love help sooner rather than later, and you then become the solution and not part of the problem. And if it was a youth, then it's a little different story because you're still responsible, so you might want to petition the court to see if they can get court-ordered into treatment. It's a different animal when you're dealing with adolescence versus youth, which I can talk about later.
Okay, so my wife, Marcia, and she shares this with people that we work with. The Lord spoke to her very clearly at one point and said, if you don't get out of my way, you're going to kill him. And it just hit her it was like, she said it was almost audible.
Yeah.
She realized it wasn't the drugs, it wasn't the alcohol, it wasn't the inappropriate behavior, it was me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't get out of God's way so he could get help. And so she stepped out of the way. And to this day, it is the most sacrificial, most evident, the biggest evidence of her love and dedication for her husband that I've ever experienced was her getting out of the way and saying, whatever it takes, God, he's yours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so powerful. I get goosebumps just as you said that because I know what that means. I as well intervened on a daughter when she was 21 and a sister just about 5 years ago, two separate kinds of issues. But, being prepared to put relationship on hold or suspend communication or contact, what I find, but what that means is if I have to do that, well, I am clearly going to find out where I sit, just like your wife found out where she sits on the priority chain of your heart. Meaning, if you're important to me, then I'm going to bend. If you're not important to me, I'm not going to bend. And so you clearly see that, well, you're not real high on the priority list there. And so you might have to make some readjustments as to, how where you fit in all of this.
Yeah.
But I believe, you distill it down, how are we created? What is the DNA in us that comes from God? And I've broken it down to three simple things. Number one, I think it's very important to us to be connected to the people we profess to love and we care about, connected in a good way, a healthy way, that it's bothersome when we're out of sorts with people we care about. Number two, it's important that we have meaning, purpose, and productivity in our life from most days one to the next. And then finally, it's very important that we live as long as we can. Especially as believers, we're kingdom building. We're preparing ourselves for eternity here.
Right.
And when we don't do what we're supposed to be doing, drugs, alcohol, mental health issues, we are doing everything the opposite of what I just described. And then there, quite frankly, lies the inner turmoil. And so when you're presented with a way to get out of that, to get back to where you were created to be, in relationship in a healthy way, being productive and having meaning and living as long as you can, there is nothing but relief that washes over you. And that is why we've had this success, too, because I've had more people that will tell me as I'm transporting them to treatment after intervention, and this could be someone who was angry at first, but, we get it all. We don't personalize any of that stuff, but they'll say, it's just so odd. I feel so relieved. And I said, well, not odd to me. I remember clearly the day I got arrested. I'm sitting in my captain's office, humiliated, embarrassed beyond belief, and yet the overwhelming feeling I had was relief. Relief because it was finally done.
Yeah.
Finally get my life back because I was killing myself, just like everybody we intervene on. They know they're going to die prematurely if we don't stop.
Right.
So, that's how we can look past the anger that gets thrown at us, or the disbelief, or the justification, the rationalization, the blaming, the scapegoating, all that. We know that that's not really the truth.
Yeah.
So we're trying to tap into the part of the heart that's been dormant, that's been hijacked. And if we can do that, it's a slam dunk every time that the person will go. Just like, you change your life when you realize, I've got to make a choice here. What's more important, my wife or my dysfunction?
Yeah.
And so, given enough time, sometimes people immediately, others take a little bit of time to process that out. But in the end, I think relationships, true life wins out every time over the temporary satisfaction of a high.
Yep. Sure does seem that way. Okay, folks, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, let's do our last sound bite. It's really important that you understand what intervention is not, and particularly CareFrontations' philosophy on this may be a little different than what you've heard in the past. Don't go away. More with my guest, Scott Graham, when we return.
Men, women, and their families experience tremendous pain and suffering due to the struggles they face from substance abuse and its co-occurring mental health challenges. They need to find a safe place for peace and healing. Therapia Addiction Healing Center was born out of a deep desire to provide that safe and powerful healing environment. Therapia exists to help people recover from addictions by developing and maintaining healthy, meaningful relationships with God, self, and others. To speak with an addiction specialist, call 1-855-652-4325. That's 1-855-652-4325. Or visit our website at www.therapia.net. Therapia Addiction Healing Center, restoring lives one step at a time.
Serenity Springs Recovery Center, located on the beautiful east coast of Florida. A unique facility that is committed to providing exceptional individual care in small group settings while utilizing their experienced and dedicated clinical and support staff of licensed therapists and doctors. Visit their website, serenityspringsrecovery.com, or call 386-423-4540. Serenity Springs, making a life-changing investment into your recovery. Scott Graham from CareFrontations. CareFrontations.com is my guest. And now here is his wife, Jenny, and she is she's sharing with us what intervention isn't. Check it out.
When people intervene, when people interrupt, when people confront on their own, they tend to be so logic-based. This is not a good idea. If logic was driving the boat, then the boat would have pulled into the harbor and they would have asked for help already. And so the greatest error you can make is to confront in this kind of logically driven way. So I think of it like the courtroom. The judge, the jury, the person on the stand. Let's stack up enough evidence to convict them into treatment. That is the worst idea. It feels, at the point of a intervention, it feels punitive, it feels judgmental. It is absolutely the wrong approach. And yet, isn't this how you roll off the cuff if you've had it up to here and then you explode and you need to go to treatment and you need this and that and it's all full of you and this pointy finger, and all of that is so counterproductive, and it just digs the situation into an even more stuck position. So throw logic off the list when you're thinking about doing an intervention. So this means that you can have someone involved in an intervention that actually has no idea that there's even a problem. So someone could come in who you've really protected in the family system from this knowledge. This could be someone who's much younger. This could be someone who's much older. It's often a grandparent, people like that. The bottom line is you don't need logic. You don't need evidence to make your intervention work.
You don't need evidence to make your intervention work. Boy, that kind of flies in the face of conventional intervention, doesn't it not?
Well, it does. So what we learned this a long time ago. People don't say yes to treatment because of what's wrong with them. People say yes to treatment because of what's right with them. And so, you have to have a little piece in your presentation that substantiates your concern, but it can be in such a vague way. It doesn't have to be where it would stand up in court. It could be, I believe that the struggles I've seen in your life have prevented you from being as productive as I think you want to be. Yeah. That could be all you need to say to substantiate your concern, because what we tell families when we first get together is, can we agree that there's a problem here? And they always go, absolutely. And is it bigger than them, and is it bigger than us? They said, yes. Well, that's all we need, because we're going to let the treatment center do the evaluation so they can assess their level of need. We're going to let them put the treatment plan together, treat them, put the continuing care plan together. We don't do any of that. Our job here is to build a high dive to allow them to freely walk up and jump off with a swan dive into the deep end of treatment versus drag their feet through the shallow end. Our job is to provide the treatment team with more information than they otherwise would ever get if they were just relying on the person to give it to them. And our job is to put a prevention tool together, not only for them, but for us too. That's all we're about through intervention. We are not doing therapy. We are not the kind of interventionists who micromanage the treatment process or the continuing care piece. We're good at getting people educated and into treatment, and we're going to trust the treatment process to do the rest.
You know, Scott, I had the honor yesterday, excuse me, of sitting in on what's called drug court, and it blew my mind. I was, and I've been in court, you know, thousands of times, and that includes my own court dates. But as an advocate, as a sponsor, as this or that, you know, and that kind of thing. And for the first time, I had no idea. I was watching officers of the court, judges, sheriffs, drug and alcohol counselors treat people with dignity, with respect, with honor. Well, it was amazing. And what I noticed was that those that were in drug court, for lack of a better term, the clients, they weren't playing head games. They weren't making excuses. It was real. And I was sitting there and I was thinking, this is what happens when you treat people with dignity. When you point out their character qualities, not always pointing out their character defects.
Oh, it's huge. I remember I just took somebody to treatment in Arizona, and this young man, he didn't have any alcohol or drug issues. He was literally depressed. I mean, so depressed that he was holed up in a room for months and months and months.
Mm-hmm.
And when I took him to treatment and was ready to hand him off, I looked at him right in the eyes, and I said, I want you to remember something. 90% of you is perfect and is wonderful and is right. There is only 10% that's off. Now, that 10% is affecting the 90 that's good, but just remember, you're only working on 10% here. And so, and the same is true for, like you just described, there is more right in a person than ever wrong, no matter if they're at the throes of their problem, there still is more right than wrong. So that's a perfect, you saw what we do over and over and over again, and people respond just like you saw yesterday over and over and over again. We love to be acknowledged on what is right with us. It's a beautiful thing. Think about this. Isn't it odd that we wait till people are dead and when we talk about how wonderful they are? The eulogies that we give at funerals?
Yeah.
And so that's a big piece of what we do. We tell people what we would normally say at a funeral at the intervention, and it blows people away. Because when you're walking in dysfunction, you not only know what you're doing is wrong, but you think everybody else knows that you're wrong. So we think when we're in dysfunction that people see us the way that we see ourselves. And that's where we change things up. We make it very, very clear that we don't see you the way that you might see yourself, because we have the ability to separate who you are from what you do. They don't. We do.
Right.
That'll generate motivation and worthiness that'll cause them to say, okay, I'll get help.
Here's some statements from people who have experienced what you guys do. Thank you for helping all of us. I don't know how you do what you do, but thank heavens you do it. You made everything make sense, feel manageable and hopeful. Another person says, we are all very grateful to you. You handled a nearly impossible situation and worked miracles. Thank you so much. You came to help us over 3 years ago to help my family get help from my dad. It was the most painful and joyful experience in my entire 28 years of life. Another person says, it's hard to put into words how a person who you have known for less than 24 hours could and did help to save your mother's life. I truly can't. The only thing I can say is wow. And then finally, may God continue to bless you both for the work that you do in giving back life to so many people. God's word says that when you have done it for the least, you have done it unto me. And that really says it all, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's just I want to share with you real quickly. Jenny just got a card yesterday from a family she helped, and just real short, it just says, this is the mom saying, as it turns out, The store does not sell, quote, "Thank you for saving my son's life," end quote, cards.
Oh.
So there it is. Thank you for the help with the rescue. What a tremendous effort. We could not have done this without you. So those are the kind of cards we get over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, we feel so humbled and so privileged to do the work that God has allowed us to do. It's not our business; it's His business.
Yeah.
And we just get privileged to be His hands and His feet and His mouthpiece, and encourage people to go rescue. And
Yeah.
That's what all about is rescue.
Yeah. Where are you folks located, Scott?
We are we're located out of our suitcase. We travel pretty extensively. I traveled over 300,000 miles last year, and Jenny over 200,000. So we actually about 10 days out of the month put our head on our own pillow, which is on Camino Island, Washington, and but literally we go all over the country and into Canada. We'll go anywhere in the world to do what we do. We have our suitcase packed at all times, and we're ready to rock and roll whenever the Lord says go.
So just because somebody doesn't live in Washington doesn't mean that they can't take advantage of your services. And that's the beautiful thing about this.
Oh, absolutely, and we've kept our price point way down too, where we oftentimes will be less than people in the other side of the country, and it's because we've been blessed. I mean, when you think about, we're doing anywhere between 6 to 10 interventions a month. And it's not about the money. We will work with people when we can, and we fly by the seat of our spirit.
Yeah. And what a lot of people don't know, that in a lot of cases, more than what people even realize, is when a person shows the willingness that only a drowning man can. Many times there are scholarships available. For
there is, and we've got a relationship with probably over 40 programs all over the country that, all they've got to say is, hey, we're working with CareFrontations, and they'll bend to make that work. We only deal with the highest quality programs, high integrity, and they're doing it for the right reasons, as I think we are as well. Yeah,
places that are doing it right, that are treating the whole person.
Mm-hmm.
That is so important. One of the best things that ever happened to me, and this was after several years of being free from the bondage of addiction, but I was still dealing with some issues mentally that had to do with severe headaches, and I had a nurse practitioner say, "How late at night do you eat?" And I said, well, I don't know, probably not after 7 o'clock. And my wife's like poking me going, liar, He says he has a very small bowl of ice cream every night about 8. She said, you know what? I don't want you to change anything else about your diet. Just stop eating the ice cream. Eat the ice cream at 5. Don't eat it at 8. Give it a week. And in 1 week's time, headaches were gone. It's amazing when we approach the nutrition side of this thing, and you don't hear about that in most of your 12-step support meetings.
Well, and not only the nutrition, but the exercise.
The exercise, yeah.
See so many people missing out on a really true recovery because they're just, again, it's a behavior modification, and we've got to address all the components of who we are. The spiritual side, the emotional, the mental, the physical. And when we do that, and we're really honest with ourselves, boy, things can change pretty dramatically, like you just described. And that's something that I want to make mention real quick too, is that when we do our interventional work, we're not so focused on just the entry point into treatment, although that has to happen first. I am more focused on what happens in treatment and thereafter. That's, to me, that's the most important. How can we help people have more profound experiences in treatment, and how can we shore up those relapse pieces? And and people will relapse because of physical ailments too, like you're just describing with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So unless those things get addressed, and there's some level of accountability and structure, there's a high chance or probability of people relapsing. So that's why it's so important that we put more focus on in-treatment experience and after-treatment experience, not just the how do we get them their experience.
Let me ask you this, Scott, because we are out of time. Do you think that you and Jenny would be willing to come back and let's do a show about that very thing, about what happens after treatment?
Absolutely, would love to. We're really focusing on the relapse prevention piece. We're working with some treatment centers right now in their family programs, focusing specifically on that. So we would love to. Okay,
I'm writing this down here on my form. Yeah. Let's do that. We'll talk off the air more about that. Scott, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to do this with us and sharing your experience, strength, and hope, what you're doing, how you're giving back to the recovery community and to the world. Thank you, brother.
Yeah, it was such an honor and a privilege. Thank you for your work too. You're doing a great work. You are definitely building treasures in heaven, my brother.
Well, thank you so much, and it's good to be doing this thing together. We need each other. It's so important because there's so many aspects. We're all we got. I mean, we're kicking against a lot of goats out there that aren't healthy. Like I said, we're kind of an interesting animal in the middle of this recovery piece. The good news is the lie is dead. We do recover. We can recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. It just happens. And but it isn't going to happen. It isn't going to happen if we're out there doing the Lone Ranger thing. Thank you so much, Scott. Scott Graham, my guest here with CareFrontations. CareFrontations.com is the website. You can call their number, 888-344-1632. Look at the YouTube page. The information's up there. Also the links on our website here. Email address is info@carefrontations.com. All right. Well, that wraps it up for another show here, focusing on the solution, letting you know that we're here. We care for you. We want to pray for you. We want you to let us know what it is that we can do to help you. If you're wondering, maybe this is the very first time you've ever even heard the word intervention, or maybe you've seen something on TV and it scared you or you made you curious or whatever, and you want to talk about it more, please feel free to drop us an email here at take12radio.com. Until our next broadcast, this is the Monty Man along with Scott Graham from CareFrontations. We're wishing God's perfect serenity for you. Bye-bye now.
This has been a broadcast of KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.
Kitty, 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 kitty.